You might think King Arthur was a real man. You might really believe it. And you might think your belief is grounded in historical facts. That's the case for many, many people. So I'm guessing that for some of you, after watching this video, you might want to explain to me in great detail in the comments why I am so very, very wrong about what I believe. That's fair enough. I could be wrong. But you're going to have to work pretty hard to convince me that there was ever a real Arthur. By all means, let's put pressure on all of these theories and see if they hold up to scrutiny. But I'm not coming from this as someone who has a passing interest. I've studied the sources closely for decades now. I know what they do and what they don't say. It's actually the lack of any new evidence about the historical Arthur that's led me to make this video. Year after year, I see the same old theories regurgitated, the same claims made, the same distinct lack of anything new to say. And I think that's because many people with an interest in Arthur are a bit distracted by the whole idea of a historical figure. It's as if they're caught in some weird temporal loop where they keep having to go over the same material again and again, forever and ever. What really strikes me is this search for the real Arthur keeps us looking in the wrong direction entirely. So let's begin with what we don't have. Gildas, who was a famous cleric writing in the 6th century, mentions the famous victory of the Battle of Badon, where the Anglo-Saxons suffered a generational defeat. In later tradition, Badon was supposed to be Arthur's great victory, but Gildas doesn't mention him. As our only contemporary source, if Arthur had been the supreme war leader of the Welsh, Gildas's silence would be a bit weird. Then in the 8th century, the Venerable Bede, writing the most important history of his age, also fails to mention Arthur in Badon or anywhere else. The first time Arthur appears in anything resembling a historical text is the Historia Brittonum, composed around 829, 3 centuries after the events it describes. But the Historia presents Arthur not as a king, but as a dux bellorum, a battle leader, a general, if you like, who fought 12 battles against the Saxons. The list reads almost like a liturgy, each battle site named, each victory attributed to Arthur alone. Now, scholars like N.J. Hyam have shown that this 9th century battle list has biblical parallels, specifically the campaigns of Joshua. That suggests the Welsh author of the Historia Brittonum was not recording history, but constructing a messianic military figure for 9th century political purposes. The Welsh dynasties of that period needed a champion against the Anglo-Saxons. The Arthur we know appears to have been created to fit that need. This is the gap at the heart of Arthurian history. 300 years between what was supposedly his greatest victory and the first time his name appears in the historical record. Now, our knowledge of this history is clearly incomplete, and so some crucial piece of evidence could well be missing. The problem is, if there's no evidence, then there's no evidence. Every theory that attempts to identify Arthur with a historical figure, Riothamus, Lucius Artorius Castus, Arthur mac Aidan, Athrois ap Meirig, they must all somehow bridge this 300-year gap. None have succeeded in doing so convincingly. There's still a lot of gap, regardless of how reasonably these arguments are sometimes made. So my question is, what if the gap isn't a problem to be solved? What if that very silence tells us something the noise of speculation can't? Maybe that silence in the historical record means we're not actually looking at history in the usual sense, but instead what we're seeing is the long evolution of a myth. Now, while historians have been searching for Arthur's grave, folklorists have been finding him pretty much everywhere else. Just think of the sheer number of places named after Arthur across Britain. Arthur's Seat, Arthur's Stone, Arthur's Quoit. These sites are scattered from Scotland to Cornwall and Brittany, from Wales to the Anglo-Saxon heartlands. His name has been given to hundreds of prehistoric monuments, stone circles and burial chambers and earthworks. And they appear simultaneously across regions that had little political connection in the post-Roman period. Thomas Green, in his study Concepts of Arthur, argued that this pattern makes no sense if Arthur was a historical king from one region. A 6th century warlord of the south would not have legends sprouting in Scotland. A northern war leader would not have his name attached to Cornish megaliths. But the pattern makes perfect sense if Arthur was never a man at all, if he was, in fact, from the very beginning, a figure of the landscape itself, a pervasive spirit the folk could see in the shadows of the forests and the darkness of the caves. The name Arthur contains Arth, of course, which is Welsh for bear. In the earliest Welsh tales, Arthur behaves like a creature of the wild, a rugged, fierce hunter, leading his warband through forests and into the stranger regions of the world. He fights giants, not Saxons. He raids the otherworld to steal magic cauldrons. He pursues the monstrous boar, Torch Trwyth, across the southern lands. He is a king, but he's a wild king, a bear of a king. This is not the Arthur of Camelot or Disney. This is something older and stranger, a wanderer of the land, a cousin of Finn McCool in Irish tradition. And it has been observed that both the Irish and Welsh hunter-warriors share quite similar stories. Both are associated with the landscape of their respective islands. Both exist in a space between history and something else entirely. And then there is the recent discovery at King Arthur's Hall on Bodmin Moor. For years, the stone enclosure was assumed to be medieval, perhaps a cattle pound or meeting place. But in 2024, radiocarbon and luminescence dating revealed the truth. The structure is actually Neolithic, over 5,000 years old. Older than Stonehenge even. So just like all the other Neolithic sites he's connected with, the name King Arthur's Hall is not a memory of a medieval king who built there. It's the later folk reimagining the sacred landscape, naming the mysterious works of the distant past after their wild and mythic hero king. Arthur, it seems, has always stood on the edge of the inexplicable. As I've discussed in the past, there is another Arthur in the Welsh sources, one who doesn't fight battles or lead warbands. Instead, he asks questions. Ymddiddan Arthur ar Eryr, the dialogue of Arthur and the Eagle, is a poem that survives in over 30 manuscript variations, copied and performed from at least the 12th century onwards. Its popularity across generations suggests it touched something deep in Welsh culture. The setting is Cornwall, beside the sea. Arthur encounters an eagle perched at the top of an oak tree. The eagle stares at him and then laughs. Arthur, describing himself here as a poet, wonders at this creature. He asks why it behaves as it does. The eagle reveals itself. It is Eliwlod, Arthur's dead nephew, returned as an enchanted eagle to speak with him. What follows is, on the surface, a poem of Christian instruction. Eliwlod answers Arthur's questions about Christ, about judgment, about the proper ordering of the soul. Arthur in this poem isn't the great king of later English and French romance. He is, as the scholar Patrick Sims-Williams puts it, a religiously uneducated but sympathetic pagan seeking enlightenment. He's the nobleman who must be taught, at least in this Christian version. But look at the structure. A living man finds an eagle at the top of an oak. Short verses are exchanged. The eagle is revealed as the transmigrated soul of a dead kinsman. The dead speak, the living learn. This structure appears elsewhere in Welsh tradition, most strikingly in the fourth branch of the Mabinogi. In the fourth branch, Lleu Llaw Gyffes is struck by a poisoned spear thrown by his wife's lover, Gronw. At the moment of his wounding, Lleu transforms into an eagle and flies to the top of an oak tree. There he perches, wounded and rotting, his flesh falling to feed a sow below. His uncle, Gwydion, searches for him. Following the sow through the Welsh landscape, Gwydion comes at last to the tree. He looks up and sees the eagle. He recognises it as Lleu, and he sings short verses, englynion, to call down the eagle. Stanza by stanza, branch by branch, until Lleu can be struck with a wand and restored to human form. The parallels with the dialogue between Arthur and Elewlod are rather obvious. In both texts, an eagle perches at the top of an oak. In both, short verses are used to communicate with this supernatural bird. In both, the eagle is the transmigrated soul of a dead nobleman. In both, the nobleman is a close kinsman of the person who finds him, nephew to uncle, nephew to uncle. But the dialogue is an explicitly Christian poem, where the fourth branch isn't, and yet they share the same underlying structure. Now, the church didn't invent this pattern. It simply inherited it. The Christian poet who composed the dialogue took a native structure, a native theme, the dialogue between the living and the dead at the otherworldly tree, and filled it with Christian teaching. It's as if the poet is speaking to their congregation through the symbolic language they already understood, their own native mythic themes. And what did that symbolic language say? That death is not an ending, that the dead do not simply vanish, that under certain conditions, at certain places, the oak tree, the boundary of the worlds, the dead may return as enchanted animals and speak, and the living may learn from them. Arthur, in the dialogue, comes to such a place and receives such a teaching. He is the questing figure, the one who does not yet know, venturing into the in-between place of the other world. The eagle is the one who has passed beyond and returned to him with mystic knowledge. So what are we actually looking for when we're trying to track down this real Arthur? Well, the historicist search has been running for centuries. It's produced plenty of theories, Rothiamus, Lucius Artorius, the Irish version, the Welsh Athrwys ap Meirig, and so on and so on. Each theory has its attractions, but each has also been very carefully scrutinised, its bones picked clean. And each theory has been found wanting. The chronologies don't fit, the etymologies don't match, the sources don't support the weight placed upon them. And underlying all of them is the 3-century gap, the silence between the supposed events of the early 6th century and the first mention of Arthur's name in the early 9th. The archaeology of the period is real enough. Tintagel was a major royal centre in the 5th and 6th centuries, connected to the Mediterranean trade networks, home to clearly literate and wealthy elites. The Artognu stone found there in 1998 proves that names with the art element were used in Dumnonian society. But Artognu is not Arthur. The archaeology reveals a world that could have produced a real Arthur, but not that it actually did. If you look instead at the only sources for Arthur, the primary sources of tradition and law, You find a man who is more Gwynap Nudd than Charlemagne, more of a King Herla than a King Henry. And this mythological Arthur grows clearer with each passing decade of scholarship. He is the bear man of the wild places. He is the leader of a supernatural warband who raids the otherworld. He is the magical huntsman in pursuit of animal-transformed souls. His name is given to ancient stones and Neolithic monuments across the enchanted landscape. He is the figure through whom we, the living, try to speak with our dead. In the meantime, the search for the real Arthur is little more than a search for a corpse. And that distracts us from what the medieval sources actually offer us. A figure who transcends death, who returns, who waits. The Welsh called him a mab darogan, the son of prophecy. He sleeps beneath the hills. He will come again in Britain's hour of need. He was never dead, but was instead dreaming. Whether a man named Arthur ever lived in the 5th and early 6th century, we just can't say. The evidence doesn't lead to any certainties. But this much is clear. The Arthur who matters, the Arthur who has sustained a culture for 1,500 years, is not a set of bones waiting to be excavated. He is a question that each generation must answer for itself. The medieval poet who composed the dialogue of Arthur and the Eagle understood something we might still learn. They weren't troubled by Arthur's historicity. They were interested in what he represented. The living man who does not yet know, standing before the tree where a soul has transmigrated into an enchanted eagle. Perhaps that's Arthur's real gift to us. Not a biography to be verified, but a perspective to take. The willingness to ask, the humility to listen, the understanding that the truest things often come from beyond the boundary of the known world, from the eagle in the oak, from the realm where the dead do not stay dead, from the avallon of cultural memory. Myths like Arthur are not supposed to be real, but they are often found to be true.